Chapter 481. Just what kind of secret was hidden in this courtyard? Just what kind of power was attached to Yu Qipeng's body? It was a feeling that made people feel disgusted with just a glance. He had a pair of eyes that made one's scalp go numb and body go cold. The soul in Yu Qipeng's body, that power was definitely not simple. Old man Tsang, if I were to display teleportation, would I be able to leave the Yuqi residence? Yiqing Luo congealed her senses as she asked in her heart. No. Old man Tsang interrupted her without hesitation. You can't use your secret technique. If you're discovered by the dark forces, they'll definitely discover that the Azure Dew bracelet is in your hands. Dark forces? Yiqing Luo's expression changed. What you mean is that energy in this courtyard is from the dark forces? Yes, the strange aura in this courtyard comes from the dark forces. It's exactly the same as the mysterious xianxia on your fourth sister. Old man Tsang's tone was extremely solemn. Girl, if the dark forces are involved, you'll be in trouble. Yiqing Luo had experienced the power of the dark forces from Yiqing Ling. Yiqing Ling had only taken a handful of items from the dark forces, and she who had her profound jade heart destroyed was able to display the strength of a cultivator. As for Yiqing Qian, she could also make use of the dark forces' power to successfully break through to the earth profound grade. This was enough to show how powerful and mysterious this power was. Yiqing Luo had never dared to underestimate the dark forces. But what made Yiqing Luo puzzled was, the dark forces were a dark existence in the Nirvana realm. In the eyes of many, this was an evil place. They were the aliens that had been banished from the Nirvana realm. Why did so many people choose to cooperate with the dark forces? It was understandable that Yiqing Ling and Yiqing Qian would seek help from the dark forces. But why would Yu Qipeng be involved with the dark forces? Recently, the actions of the dark forces have become more and more rampant. Old man Tsang sighed worriedly. Logically speaking, the people of the Nirvana realm looked down on those who hid in the dark. If they really met, they would only forcefully expel the dark ones from the Nirvana realm. But more and more profound practitioners chose to accept the power of darkness. The dark forces were getting restless recently. After all, they were carrying out some kind of plan. The world might not be peaceful anymore. Going against him head-on, I have no chance of winning. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. She stared at Yu Qipeng, who was still lying on the ground, not moving at all. He was still using that pair of sharp eyes to stare intently at her. The current Yu Qipeng was too strange. Since she couldn't use her secret technique, she couldn't escape even if she wanted to. What should she do in this situation? Old man Tsang naturally understood Yiqing Luo's current physique and profound grade the best. Yiqing Luo indeed didn't have the ability to go head-to-head with Yu Qipeng. Lass, is there any way to contact DMO Xian? If DMO Xian was here, just a Yu Qipeng, even if it was Yu Qipeng who had attached himself to the dark forces, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Yiqing Luo was stunned as she slowly shook her head. It had always been DMO Xian looking for her. She had never specially looked for DMO Xian, let alone contacting him. Old man Tsang remained silent for a moment. Yiqing Luo only felt a scorching heat on her wrist, as though it was burning her wrist. She immediately raised her hand, and on her left wrist, a circle of cherry blossom runes appeared indistinctly. The red flowing light kept flashing. What was moving was tiny wisps of flames jumping in joy. Chapter 482. Yu Qipeng moved. When Yiqing Luo raised her wrist, Yu Qipeng moved. Perhaps it was because of the red stream of light on Yiqing Luo's wrist which gave Yu Qipeng a sense of threat. Yu Qipeng's palms slapped out a swift and fierce palm wind. The surrounding sand and dust were all lifted up by this airflow. His aura was like 10,000 layers of wind and waves that could devour mountains and rivers. Yiqing Luo reacted in time, and with a leap, her figure was like lightning as she avoided that palm wind. He leaped into the air, and with a few teleportation steps, he retreated a long distance. Not knowing if it was a misperception, the killing intent in Yu Qipeng's eyes seemed to have become even more intense. Not waiting for Yiqing Luo's reaction, Yu Qipeng's arm slid like a snake as a whirlwind rose beneath his feet. His loose robe fluttered in the strong wind. Following that, an even more powerful palm wind swept over. Yiqing Luo's feather fan moved, intending to borrow the power of her profound qi dance to block the pressure from this palm wind. Suddenly she heard old man Tsang's stern shout, "Girl, let's go." The burning sensation on his wrist became more and more obvious. The circle of cherry blossoms was like a tattoo branded on her wrist. The fragmented enchanting red light formed a complicated totem. Old man Tsang's voice paused. Yiqing Luo only felt an inexhaustible energy diffusing from the cherry blossoms. It was old man Tsang who was helping her. Yiqing Luo's fingers clenched into a fist as her feet stepped onto that set of footwork. In a split second, like a bolt of lightning, her figure had already arrived at the walls of the Yuchi Manor's entrance. She could not use the teleportation secret technique. But she could still use this set of footwork from her previous life. If she were to directly use her footwork, she might not be able to avoid Yuchi Peng's Qijin. Fortunately, old man Tsang had used the power of the Azure Dew bracelet to protect her. Before Yiqing Luo left the Yuchi residence, she turned her head towards that strange courtyard. At the open courtyard door, Yuchi Peng is standing there with a pair of sinister eyes filled with killing intent staring at her. Seeing her stop, Yuchi Peng's eyes flashed and he strode forward as if he wanted to catch up to her. Yiqing Luo's heart skipped a beat and with a leap she flipped down from the top of the wall. When he saw the courtyard from the corner of his eyes, Yuchi Peng stood at the entrance of the courtyard. His face was filled with rage and a vicious aura overflowed. However, his legs were pressed against the door of the courtyard, and he did not have the slightest intention to catch up. When Yiqing Luo returned to the mansion, her body was still cold and stiff. Qiao Jin and the others gathered around to ask about the results. Yiqing Luo shook her head. What I can confirm is, Yuchi Peng indeed has a way to complete the mission. I'm guessing that there's a possibility that the exquisite pagoda is with him. Impossible. Enai Ruopan tilted her head as she took out a small booklet from her bosom and flipped a few pages. I specially went to investigate on matters regarding Death God Castle. As long as an item is placed in the Death God Castle, unless the original owner of the item went to retrieve it, otherwise, the exquisite pagoda would definitely not be in the hands of enemies outside of the Death God Castle. Then what if the owner of the exquisite pagoda collaborated with Yuchi Peng? Yin Xiaoyi raised a hypothesis. That's even more impossible. The exquisite pagoda was a rare treasure that was recorded in the mysterious treasures record. Cooperating with Yuchi Peng is equivalent to giving the exquisite pagoda to the person who gave the mission. This kind of losing deal, who would be willing to do it? One must know that the world's rare treasures which were recorded in the mysterious treasures record were all things which were hard to find in the world. Who would be willing to hand it over to others? When Yiqing Luo heard that, her expression didn't loosen up at all. Chapter 483. Qiao Jin's expression congealed. You mean? Just a guess. After all, if we do this, it's too obvious and the Mercenary Association isn't a fool. Yiqing Luo nodded her head slightly, acknowledging Qiao Jin's guess. Alright, I'll go check on it later. If the one who issued the mission was related to the owner of the exquisite pagoda, then this was a huge conspiracy. Not only would it allow Yuchi Peng to gain, the exquisite pagoda would also return to the original owner's hands, and in the end, they would be able to seek compensation from Death God Castle for the theft. There was a possibility that the entire Mercenary Association would be implicated in this. From then on, the Mercenary Association would be suppressed. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as her eyes contained a deep meaning. There was one more important point. If she hadn't guessed wrongly, that energy which occupied Yuchi Peng's body was still unable to leave Yuchi Peng's courtyard. Yuchi Peng only started to change after he entered the courtyard. After he discovered Yiqing Luo, he only stood on the same spot and struck out his palm wind attack. And after she speedily climbed over the wall and left, he had no intention to chase after her. Yuchi Peng had already made a soul exchange with the dark forces. After she discovered this secret, shouldn't he chase up to her and silence her? If it was Yuchi Peng, if it was the dark forces' energy, even if she had old man Tsang's help, it wasn't impossible for him to chase up to her. But Yuchi Peng didn't leave that courtyard. Last, your thinking is very correct. Old man Tsang sighed softly as though he recalled something. The reason why the dark forces are called as the dark forces is because that bunch of people in the dark forces use the dark arts which are intolerable in this world. Like your eldest sister, fourth sister, Yuchi Peng and the others, if they wanted to cooperate with the dark forces, they would have to fork out an equivalent price to exchange for power. Yuchi Peng used his own soul to make the exchange. Yuchi Peng's courtyard should be the place where the dark forces' energy resides. Over there, the dark forces' energy can freely control Yuchi Peng's body. But if he leaves the courtyard, the dark forces will leave Yuchi Peng. Speaking of this, old man Tsang's voice turned gloomy as he revealed some worries. Do you still remember your fourth sister being controlled by that profound Yinqi long sword? Yiqing Luo naturally remembered. That was the first time she came into contact with the dark forces and the power of the dark forces. If Yuchi Peng uses this power that is used for trading and attaches it to something, He can also use the power of the dark forces outside of the courtyard. When Old Man Song's words fell, Yi Qing Luo's heart thumped. This was the same as Yi Qing Ling holding onto that long sword from the dark forces. Under the situation where her profound jade heart was destroyed, she could still exert her profound energy and launch an attack. However, such a method could easily cause the host's physical body to be completely devoured. This was probably the reason why Yu Qipeng could only allow the dark forces to attach themselves to him in his own courtyard. Yu Qipeng does not wish to bear the consequences of being devoured. Last, you have to be more careful during this period of time. There are suddenly so many people around you who have made deals with the dark forces. I'm afraid the dark forces will target you. I need to raise my profound rank to the Earth Profound Realm as soon as possible. Old Man Song lowered his voice, his tone revealing a bit of helplessness. Originally he thought that by Yi Qing Luo's side he could slowly guide her bit by bit, consolidate his own foundation and cultivate profound qi. Chapter 484. Based on Yi Qing Luo's current ability, she could only barely stand firm in this world. When Old Man Song thought of his own mission, he suddenly felt that he still had a long way to go. Qing Luo. Long Yunzhan, who was seated on the main seat, suddenly opened his mouth and called out Yi Qing Luo's name. Yi Qing Luo kept her thoughts as she congealed her gaze towards him. Are we going to give up on this mission? Long Yunzhan's voice was extremely light, and no one could tell what he was feeling. Yi Qing Luo was slightly stunned as she narrowed her eyes. Should he give up? She did not know the answer to this question. Di Zun disagrees. Long Yunzhan's index finger lightly tapped on the table. The thumping sound was like a drum beating on everyone's heart. Ripples that resembled flowing water flickered in those azure blue eyes. Faintly, an electric current flashed through them. There's a very strange feeling coming from Yu Qipeng. As a human dragon, Long Yunzhan's perception was much sharper than that of humans. When he first saw Yu Qipeng, Long Yunzhan sensed that kind of dangerous aura from Yu Qipeng. He's too dangerous. If this mission involves others, our team won't be able to withstand the pressure. It's too dangerous. In other words, Long Yunzhan's opinion was to give up this mission. Long Yunzhan had already sensed it. Yu Qipeng's entire person was emitting that profound yin qi. It was no wonder that everyone felt disgusted when they saw him. Long Yunzhan could roughly guess that behind Yu Qipeng, there might be an unknown power. This power was mysterious and unfathomable. If the world group's members were to forcefully charge in, not only would they not gain any benefits, they would also suffer heavy losses. Even if we give up on this mission, Yu Qipeng might not let the world group off. This time round, the Iron Blood Warriors had embarrassed themselves in front of the mercenary guild, using the Iron Blood Warriors' face to exchange for the world group's glory. The Iron Blood Warriors would never let the world group off. Even if Emohan Shang had said that, even if Emohan Shang had joined the world group. But that didn't mean that Yu Qipeng would let the world group off. It was only a matter of time. Yu Qipeng was injured today. After returning to the courtyard, he would definitely borrow the power of the dark forces to raise his profound level. From eavesdropping on his conversation with Duke Jing, Yi Qing Luo knew that Yu Qipeng was determined to get this high-grade rare mission. Yi Qing Luo stood up as her vision swept across the hall. Looking down at the youths who were staring at them with serious expressions, he cleared his throat and calmly said, "Do you think we should give up on this mission?" The world group did not belong to her alone. She didn't want to give up on this mission. But after witnessing Yu Qipeng making a deal with the dark forces, Yi Qing Luo's first reaction was the world group's brothers. She was no longer alone. Every single word and action was related to the world group. If they were to fight with the dark forces, not only would she not be able to protect herself, but her brothers would also not be able to escape. She should discuss this mission with her brothers before making a decision. The youths pursed their lips and clenched their fists. Their hearts were also extremely complicated. There was no one who did not fear death and danger. Hearing Yi Qing Luo, Long Yunzhan and the others' conversation, they were very clear on the danger of this mission. When they heard about Death God Castle, they already had the thought of retreating. Chapter 485. Yi Qing Luo took in everyone's expressions. Her lips curled as her lips revealed a relieved smile. Let's make our decision tomorrow. Other than the danger of Death God Castle, this mission concerns another powerhouse and the danger has exceeded what we can handle. The youthful faces of the youths all revealed expressions of terror. Other than Death God Castle, there was another dangerous powerhouse? The usually confident Yi Qing Luo said these words because in her heart, she already had the intention to give up. Although they hadn't interacted with Yi Qing Luo for a long time, But these youngsters had some understanding towards Yi Qingluo's character. They were very clear that the reason why Yi Qingluo chose to give up was mainly because she was worried about them. After all, this high-grade rare mission not only involved Death God Castle. Leave all these troublesome matters till tomorrow. Today is the first day of our mercenary group registration and also the day that Han Shang joins the world group. Tonight we'll book the entire restaurant. Xiao Jin will be the host. Yan Xiaoyi stood up and her clear voice intentionally broke the heavy atmosphere in a light tone as she clapped her hands. Xiao Jin instantly stood up. Why am I the host? Clothing, food, lodging and transportation. This lady is in charge of clothing, lodging and transportation and you're freaking not happy to be in charge of food? Are you a man or not? Yan Xiaoyi disdainfully glanced sideways at Xiao Jin as she gave a cold harumph. Xiao Jin's lips twitched. Listening to these words, why did it seem like they had all become Yan Xiaoyi's sugar babies? And even doubted if he was a man? Xiao Jin's thin lips tugged as his body suddenly closed in on Yan Xiaoyi as a pair of evil eyes revolved around her. Following that, he suppressed his voice as he leaned close to her ear. Whether I'm a man or not, you can try. Simply shameless. Yan Xiaoyi's cheeks suddenly flushed with heat. That warm breath by her ear gently landed on her skin, bringing along a man's unique scent. Yan Xiaoyi's quick-witted beautiful eyes stared fiercely at Xiao Jin who suddenly closed in on her. Xiao Jin's face was instantly magnified and reflected in his eyes. Having been used to the elegant and refined Long Yunjian, and having seen Diamo Xian's heaven-shaking peerless elegance, Xiao Jin's looks, which could at most be considered as pleasing to the eye, seemed extremely ordinary. At least on normal days Yan Xiaoyi felt that way. But at this moment, this face, which could not be considered good-looking, had an indescribable unique charm that attracted her gaze. Yan Xiaoyi only felt that her cheeks were even hotter, her heart was actually beating wildly uncontrollably. This feeling, what was going on? She usually had more intimate contact with Xiao Jin, but she had never felt so flustered. Sister Yan and brother Xiao are going to kiss. A clear and sweet voice rang out. Kitty Li stood up with her hands clasped together, staring at Yan Xiaoyi and Xiao Jin with a face full of excitement. That pair of watery, pitch-black eyes shone with a luster of excitement. This voice caused the two people who were still staring at each other to come back to their senses. Suddenly, the two of them looked as if they had seen a ghost. Their eyes widened and they pushed each other away. *CK. Xiao Jin. Have you taken a fancy to this young lady's beauty? Go away, you're disgusting. Your mother. Yan Xiaoyi, I feel even more disgusted, alright? Seeing the two of them fighting again, Kitty Li blinked her long eyelashes in puzzlement as she tilted her head and pouted her lips in puzzlement. Weren't you going to kiss earlier? Why are you fighting again? Could it be that Kitty Li said something wrong? The youngsters roared with laughter. Chapter 486. In the evening, the group arrived majestically at Three Spring City's No. 1 Inn, Heavenly Fortune Inn. In the afternoon, Xiao Jin had already booked a table at the inn. When the group arrived, a waiter went up to welcome them and led them to the large private room on the second floor. On the left side of the second floor there were many private rooms, whereas on the right side there were 3 large private rooms. This kind of large private room was enough to accommodate 4 large tables and 100 over people. After entering the private room, it was the youngsters' first time coming to such a place and they started looking around as their eyes were filled with curiosity and joy. Very quickly, the waiter served the dishes which had been prepared earlier and several jars of wine were served. Today the brothers had temporarily thrown the matter of the mission to the back of their minds and everyone was happy, so they didn't stop drinking. Jars of wine were served one after another. After the meal, many of these youngsters who didn't know how to drink all sprawled on the table and fell asleep. There were quite a number of them who were in a drunken state as they kept shouting, "The world group." The last ones who were still sober were Long Yunjian and the others. Yi Qingluo wasn't in a good mood, so she didn't reject all the wine which the brothers offered her as her head felt a little heavy. She raised her finger and pressed on her forehead as she looked at Yi Fengyu, who was quietly sleeping beside her, as she shook her head helplessly. "I'll go get the waiter and get him to bring some money back to the mansion." Yi Qingluo's body swayed as she stood up unsteadily. Long Yunjian stared at her swaying figure as his brows creased tightly as he abruptly stood up. Long Yunjian was also persuaded to drink quite a lot of wine. He drank more than Yi Qingluo, but at this moment, he didn't look drunk at all. His footsteps were steady as he chased up to Yi Qingluo in a few steps as he held onto her arm. "Qingluo, I'll go get him." His hand held onto Yi Qingluo's wrist. That indescribable feeling suddenly gushed up his mind. The side of his face actually felt slightly hot. The soft wrist in his palm felt completely different from the touch of Qiao Jin and the others. It made him develop a kind of impulse to hold on to this hand forever, not letting go. This thought made Long Yunjian's heart trembled fiercely as a sliver of panic flashed past his azure blue eyes. He pulled Yiqing Luo aside and opened the private room's door. A very familiar voice came from outside the door. "Have you heard? It's about the eldest miss of the Yi family." "I've heard of her. I didn't expect her to look so pure and kind on the outside to be so slutty on the inside. She even wanted to steal her own sister's fiancé. Just how much does she lack men? I've long heard that there's something going on between her and Duke Ping." Previously, didn't that slut Yiqing Luo create a ruckus at Three Springs Sect's entrance several times? The eldest miss of the Yi clan deliberately sought death to prove her innocence. The Three Springs Sect's fate has come to an end. Sooner or later they will be kicked out of the four great sections, two little bitches, one cheap and the other reckless. These people could not conceal their disgust and ridicule towards the two young ladies of the Yi clan. Yiqing Luo could tell that the little slut in their words was referring to her. This voice, it was Lu Xuelan. As well as those high profound class 2 students. "That's not what I'm talking about." Lu Xuelan lowered her voice and said mysteriously. The other ladies immediately echoed, "Then what's the matter? Could it be that she's done something slutty again and it's even more explosive than that illicit affair with Duke Ping in the garden in broad daylight?" Chapter 487. These ladies were all unmarried young ladies from influential families. But the words that were hanging on their lips were so vulgar that it was unbearable to the ears. Luckily there were no outsiders around. If the customers were to hear this, these ladies would probably be reprimanded by their family's elders. Lu Xuelan gave a mysterious laugh. Wasn't Yiqing Qian married to Duke Ping by the monarch? But based on her unrestrained nature, she has already hooked up with Second Prince. What? Second Prince? I heard that. Second Prince is preparing to request to the monarch to marry Yiqing Qian as his imperial concubine. Lu Xuelan's tone was filled with ridicule as she spat in disdain. A vixen is indeed a vixen, her ability to seduce men is not small at all. The few female students' expressions changed. Yan Zhenfei, who was standing beside Lu Xuelan, drew in a breath of cold air. "Vice President, I heard that Yiqing Qian's lower body was spoilt by Duke Ping. The female doctor said that she needs to recuperate for several months and cannot do that. Thing. Yiqing Qian can still hook up with Second Prince? Who knows?" Lu Xuelan gave a light harumph. A vixen has her own ways. As the few of them were talking, they walked to the room next to Yiqing Luo's as they pushed open the door. The group of them were just about to enter when they heard Yan Zhenfei shrieking, "Yiqing Luo? What are you doing here?" Yan Zhenfei's foot, which had stepped into the room, retracted as she pointed towards Yiqing Luo's direction with a shocked expression. When Lu Xuelan heard Yan Zhenfei's shriek, her vision immediately followed Yan Zhenfei's gaze. On seeing Yiqing Luo in the open door of the room next door, her pupils swiftly widened. Earlier, their words were all heard by Yiqing Luo? Lu Xuelan trio started to tremble uncontrollably. What happened on the second story of the library pavilion had already become a nightmare in their hearts. They hated Yiqing Luo, but they were also afraid of Ghost Doctor, who was backing her. Ghost Doctor's disciple. If they offended Yiqing Luo and she told Ghost Doctor, they would absolutely. Recalling the last time when Ghost Doctor asked the administrator to dig his eyes out, their bodies trembled even more. The group of high profound class 2 students following behind didn't understand what was going on. Why was it that their high and mighty vice president, upon seeing the trash from Devil class, was scared to such a state? "Didn't you just call me a slut quite happily?" Lu Xuelan and Yan Zhenfei's reactions were seen clearly by Long Yunjian, who was standing beside Yiqing Luo. These people. Why were they so afraid of Yiqing Luo? He squinted his azure blue eyes as he glanced sideways at Yiqing Luo, who wasn't drunk at all, as his eyes dimmed. He slowly loosened his grip on Yiqing Luo's hand, leaving that hand hanging by his side as his fingers clenched tightly. As though this was the only way he could hold Yiqing Luo's fragrance and touch in his palm. "Say it, why aren't you continuing?" Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes slightly. Her expression was indifferent, but the smile on her lips revealed some eerie coldness. Lu Xuelan's face was pale as she squeezed Yan Zhenfei's hand. They knew that Yiqing Luo had the Ghost Doctor behind her, but the other students in the high profound class didn't know about it. One of the female students furrowed her brows in displeasure. They were students from the high profound class. Why would they be afraid of a Devil class student? Even if this Yiqing Luo was not bad-looking and had some ability. But in Heavenly Academy did they lack talented people? So what if I said you're a slut? You still don't want to admit it? A few days ago in the academy, you fainted from the fright of the killers. I don't know who saved you perhaps. Before you were saved you were still? Chapter 488. The group of students behind roared with laughter. Now that you mention it, I'm curious too, student Yi, you fainted at the scene where the killers were pursuing you. You look so stunning, those killers. I'm afraid they couldn't bear to kill you just like that. Saying that, everyone's gaze towards Yiqing Luo was filled with an ambiguous look. Their commotion attracted the attention of the customers on the first floor. They all turned their gazes towards Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo, Three Springs Sect's trash young matriarch, there was no one in Three Springs City who didn't know her. Especially for someone who had been a trash for more than 10 years, suddenly able to cultivate and even managed to enter Heavenly Academy, setting the record for the shortest time in Heavenly Academy's entrance examinations. It even caused a stir in the entire Three Springs City. Moreover, Yiqing Luo's elder sister Yiqing Qian, her beauty had already spread far and wide. Now hearing these high-profound class students talking about this hypothesis, and thinking of Yiqing Qian, who knows, the blood of the Yi family might have some unbearably lascivious genes in it. Don't say any more. Yanjun Fei shuddered when she heard the students' voices around her. She looked at Yiqing Luo in terror and exchanged glances with Lu Shuilan before taking quick steps into the private room. If you don't want to eat, then wait outside. Those two female students echoed each other and successfully brainwashed the customers, believing that Yiqing Luo had been humiliated by those killers and were in a good mood. Suddenly hearing Lu Shuilan's sharp cry, they had a shock. Turning their heads to look at Lu Shuilan, they saw her pale face filled with shock towards Yiqing Luo. They frowned tightly. They simply couldn't understand why Lu Shuilan would be afraid of a devil-class trash. Towards Lu Shuilan, they usually fawned over her, but that was because Lu Shuilan was now the acting vice president. Because of Yiqing Qian, because of Lu Shuiyu, their high-profound class had fallen into Yiqing Luo's hands. They had become the academy's joke. Now that they had walked out of the academy in front of those people outside the academy, these two female students couldn't take it lying down. They were high-profound class students, they had excellent aptitudes and were high up in the ranks. Why should they be suppressed by a notorious trash? Why should they become a joke in Heavenly Academy, and when they walked out of the academy, they still had to become a joke? Vice President, why are you afraid of a piece of trash? We are speaking the truth. Two female students walked in front of Yiqing Luo and raised their hands towards her face. Slut. Slutty Yiqing Qian's sister is also a slut in her bones. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased tightly as she endured the heavy feeling coming from her head. Her cold and charming eyes turned cold as she speedily moved sideways. She reached out and grabbed the wrist of the girl who was about to slap her. With a violent tug, the female student staggered towards Yiqing Luo. Pa! A crisp sound rang out on the woman's face. In Yiqing Luo's hand, a red feather fan appeared out of nowhere. She slapped the female student's face with her fan, leaving a deep mark on her face. Yiqing Luo's slap was merciless. He condensed his xianxia and beat the female student until she spat out blood and a few of her teeth fell out. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and as though she was throwing rubbish, she threw this female student out. Motherf *her, I'm in a bad mood. This bunch of clowns insisted on coming up to be her venting bucket, so she wouldn't stand on ceremony. Trash, high-profound class students, no matter how much they think highly of themselves, they can't change the nature of trash. Chapter 489. You. The other female student's face revealed an infuriated expression. The female student had not expected Yiqing Luo to make a move just like that. Usually after staying in Heavenly Academy for a long time, these students had already formed a habit, not daring to make a move rashly. Yiqing Luo had long memorized the academy's rules in her mind. In the academy, they indeed said that they were not allowed to fight privately. But once they left the academy could not control them. Even if Yiqing Luo released her profound qi and killed this female student directly, Heavenly Academy had no right to interfere. At most, it would be this female student's family who came to find trouble with her. This mouth, if it only has the ability to spread rumors, then this young matriarch feels that there's no use in keeping it. Yiqing Luo's eyes blinked as she gave a dainty smile. She waved the feather fan in her hand as she walked slowly and stopped in front of that female student. That slightly waving feather fan suddenly opened up. A sharp blade slid down from the fan's handle. Yiqing Luo's fingertip moved and that blade stuck onto the female student's mouth. She was smiling sweetly and innocently. But her eyes were icy cold as though it was covered with frost. The female student's body stiffened, not even daring to move her eyes. After meeting Yiqing Luo's charming eyes, her entire body turned stiff and the expression on her face revealed a terrified expression. Yiqing Luo had addressed herself as this young matriarch, which meant that her beating them up now had nothing to do with the academy. She was using the identity of Three Springs Sect's young matriarch to give this slap and to destroy their mouse. After hearing what Yiqing Luo said, Lu Xuelan and the other two who were sitting in the next room subconsciously recalled. That day on the second story of the library pavilion, Ghost Doctor also used this kind of casual tone to ask the administrator to dig out his eyes. In their hearts they were overwhelmed with shock. These were all high profound class 2 students. If these 2 female students offended Yiqing Luo, there was a possibility that the entire high profound class 2 would suffer a calamity. Ghost Doctor's character didn't care if they were the academy's elites or not. To stand up for his own disciple or whatever, it was just a matter of mood. You want to? The female student felt the coldness by the side of her mouth. She didn't dare to move. She blurted out 2 words. With a slight twitch of her facial muscles, the female student felt a stinging pain on her cheek, as if some kind of liquid was seeping out. She was so shocked that she didn't dare to speak again. This Yiqing Luo was simply a lunatic. Yiqing Luo would really kill her. How did we spread rumors? The female student who was thrown out stood up, clutching her chest. A few of her teeth had been broken, so when she spoke, her words were extremely strange. Her voice was leaking air and her pronunciation was unclear. However, he could still hear the rage in his voice clearly. You're the same as your slutty elder sister. The female student raised one hand and pointed at the youngsters who were lying unsteadily in the private room, and then pointed at Long Yunzhan who was beside Yiqing Luo. Aren't you on intimate terms with the overlord? Why is she with another man now? Does Di Zun know that we're having a secret meeting and drinking here? She suddenly laughed as her face was filled with ridicule. I don't think you and Di Zun have any relationship at all. You only know how to use this face of yours to go around seducing men? Before she could finish her words, Yiqing Luo didn't move. Instead it was Long Yunzhan who was beside her, who had moved to the front of the female student in a blink of an eye. His long arms stretched out as his 5 fingers strangled the female student's neck. That pair of azure blue eyes was as resplendent as a lantern, sparkling with excitement. Under that radiance, a thick murderous intent shot out. Your mouths indeed can't be taken. Chapter 490. The last word after was clearly said. A miserable shriek was heard from the female student's mouth. The entire heavenly fortune was especially silent. That miserable shriek, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking, was extremely clear. The crowd looked at Long Yunzhan in disbelief. Some of the timid customers who couldn't stand the sight of blood directly bowed their heads and retched. There were quite a number of spectators who subconsciously rubbed their lower jaws. What did they see? Long Yunzhan's large palm rose from the female student's neck and wrapped around her lower jaw. Without any hesitation, his 5 fingers suddenly clenched tightly. That female student's lower jaw bone was shattered and all her teeth were broken. Blood flowed down her mouth. That miserable shriek was her last sound. Long Yunzhan saw the blood stains on his palm and his elegant brows creased slightly as he wiped his hand on the female student's body. Following that, just like what Yiqing Luo did earlier, he casually threw her out. The crowd drew in a breath of cold air. Who on earth was this young man? His actions were so decisive. The female student who was under Yiqing Luo's feather fan instantly felt her legs go soft and could no longer stand properly. That miserable shriek was too horrifying. The one whose lower jaw bone was crushed was herself. The female student didn't even dare to think about it. Her entire body collapsed onto the ground. That sharp blade drew an extremely shallow scar on her face. The female student didn't have any reaction, as her eyes stared blankly in front, as she panted heavily. What's the matter, is a fight about to start? Qiao Jin's loud voice was heard from the room. Not long later he and Yen Shaoi walked out. The crowd's vision shifted onto the both of them. Your clothing, why? Among the high profound class 2 students, someone noticed their clothing. Following the open door they looked inside. The entire room was filled with dozens of young men and women, all dressed in the same uniform. Apparently this was a team. Xuanhuan Fangyi stood in the crowd as his pupils suddenly opened wide. These are devil classes. Students? Ever since Yi Qing Luo and Shangguan Liuli had a conflict, Shangguan Fangyi specially investigated everything about Yi Qing Luo. According to the investigation, Yi Qing Luo had been a cripple for more than 10 years. Other than a lame maidservant, she had no one close to her and no friends at all. And after she got to know Dmo Xian and started cultivating, she did not get close to anyone or talk to anyone. But now, there were more than 60 people sitting in the room. To be able to drink and chat merrily, it was definitely not an ordinary friendship. The only explanation was, these people were the devil class's students, and after Yi Qing Luo joined the devil class, she made friends with them. As soon as he said this, no one in the surroundings believed him. Although the group of people in front of him were drunk and in a mess, he could more or less see the restless, profound energy flowing around their bodies. These people were definitely not weak. How could they be a bunch of trash from the devil class? Yi Qing Luo sneered as she lowered her eyes and swept a glance at the terrified female students who were kneeling by her feet. She then raised her eyes and looked at those people from high profound class 2. Since you're here at the inn to eat, then eat properly. If the food can't stop your mouths, I don't mind helping you to do it. Finishing her words, she lifted her leg and kicked the female student towards the direction of high profound class 2 like she was kicking a ball. The female student was caught by a group of students. At this moment, no one dared to open their mouths to say a single word. Lu Shuelan and Yan Zhenfei hid in the private room, not daring to come out. Chapter 491. Pure-colored nine-tailed fox? When the customers heard this exclamation, they all stuck their heads out to take a look outside the inn. At the entrance of the Heavenly Fortune Inn stood a snow-white white fox with its head raised proudly. That white fox's size was almost the height of the inn, and its 9 white tails kept swaying. The white fur swayed along with the wind like a white wave. Under the heavens there was only one pure white 9-tailed fox. The Overlord's sacred beast, Little Nine. Which meant the Overlord had appeared? Everyone started to stand up as they rushed to the entrance. Little Nine's appearance caused the entire Three Springs city to go into an uproar. Everyone surrounded Little Nine, looking up at the imposing and majestic 9-tailed fox, their hearts filled with reverence and respect. Little Nine represented not only the one and only sacred beast in the world. It also represented the Overlord. Yi Qing Luo, who was standing on the second floor, also saw Little Nine standing at the entrance. Those youngsters who were still conscious behind her all stuck their heads out to take a look. This was the first time they had seen the sacred beast 9-tailed fox. That elegant figure, that arrogant temperament, it was indeed the Overlord's sacred beast. These youngsters all started to shout out as their faces, which were flushed red from the alcohol, were filled with adoration towards Dmo Xian, yearning towards the 9-tailed fox. Long Yunzhan's face was calm as he was expressionless. A pair of azure blue eyes stared intently at Yi Qing Luo's side, looking at the 9-tailed fox below. One could tell that when Yi Qing Luo saw Little Nine, her pair of frosty eyes started to circulate with a gentle glow. That devastatingly beautiful yet flamboyant, enchanting face, the contours were filled with gentleness. As though through Little Nine she saw another person. Another man who occupied her body and mind. By his ears, the youngster's fervent cheers and reverence towards Dmo Xian made Long Yunzhan feel even more frustrated. All his changes were seen clearly by Qiao Jin, who was by his side. Qiao Jin saw the usually expressionless Long Yunzhan, who would not reveal any emotions on his face, was actually filled with rage. Qiao Jin's heart jumped. He knew that Long Yunzhan had feelings for Yi Qing Luo. But he had not expected that after he found out that Yi Qing Luo was already together with Dmo Xian, before he could dispel this thought, extinguish this thought. If this feeling caused a rift between the two of them, this was not good. Standing on the standpoint of brothers, Qiao Jin naturally hoped that Yi Qing Luo would choose Long Yunzhan. However, as a bystander he could see everything clearly. It wasn't just him. All the brothers in the world group could tell. Yi Qing Luo's unique feelings towards Dmo Xian was something that none of them could compare to. Long Yunzhan had no way to come between Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian. Qiao Jin's expression was solemn. He was about to walk over and stand between them. But she saw Long Yunzhan's elegant brows creased slightly as he abruptly grabbed Yi Qing Luo's wrist once again as he leaned close to her ear and whispered, "What's a 9-tailed fox? Riding a blue dragon is even cooler than a 9-tailed fox." Yi Qing Luo was stunned as her vision slowly met Long Yunzhan's face with a question mark. Ha! Qiao Jin, The moment he said this, Long Yunjian realized what he had said. He was dumbfounded. How could he say such a thing? He was actually jealous of a nine-tailed fox. Long Yunjian's hand shook as he let go of Yiqing Luo's wrist. Xiao Jin leaned forward in time as his elbow knocked backwards, pushing Long Yunjian away by an inch. Chapter 492. Yiqing Luo replied with an "oh," as she didn't doubt Xiao Jin's explanation. At this moment, Yiqing Luo didn't have any other thoughts to guess the meaning behind Long Yunjian's words. Her vision was congealed on Little Nine. Little Nine was here, then where was Diamo Xian? Was he still angry? Yiqing Luo actually felt a little anxious. She pursed her pink lips and was about to jump down from the second floor's railing. But she saw a black-robed young man walking out from the surrounding crowd as he stopped beside the nine-tailed fox. He raised his head and stared at the nine-tailed fox. "Little Nine, I'll go up to invite her." Woo! Little Nine's sharp mouth moved as it gave off a soft moan. The young man stepped into Heavenly Fortune Inn, and when he raised his head, he saw the young lady standing on the second floor's railing. His brows creased as his face revealed disdain. But he still bore with this unhappiness as he leapt into the air and landed not too far away from Yiqing Luo. The sudden appearance of the young man attracted the attention of Xiao Jin and the others. Almost in an instant, Xiao Jin and the others blocked in front of Yiqing Luo. High Profound Classes students' expressions had a huge change as all of them retreated a few steps, attempting to hide behind their classmates. This young man was too strange. They couldn't tell his profound grade from him. But from him, there was a kind of imposing manner which made one involuntarily submit to him. This imposing manner made the world group's youngsters crease their brows in puzzlement. Why did it feel so familiar? This young man was able to stand beside the nine-tailed fox and even converse with her. No matter how they looked, he wasn't simple. Wind. Suddenly, a clear female voice was heard from Xiao Jin's back. Yiqing Luo pushed aside the few people who were blocking in front of her as she squinted her eyes and fixed her gaze on that young man for a long time. This face wasn't what she remembered Wind to look like. But this imposing manner and this figure, it should be Wind. Wind? Xiao Jin was astonished. This young man Yiqing Luo knew him? He's Ah Xian's guardian. Yiqing Luo explained as she looked towards Wind. You and Little Nine. Overlord asked me to fetch Miss Yi for a gathering. Wind directly interrupted Yiqing Luo's words. Gathering? Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly. If Diamo Xian wanted to see her, he would always appear beside her directly. Since when did he need to send Little Nine and Wind over to create such a huge scene? Wait a minute. A battle formation? Yiqing Luo's breathing suddenly stopped as her heartbeat sped up. Diamo Xian wouldn't be doing it on purpose, right? Purposely creating such a big scene, sending out protectors and little Jiao, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he invited her to a gathering. This was a declaration to the entire Three Springs city. She, Yiqing Luo, had a close relationship with the Overlord. Her thigh was the Overlord. Could it be Diamo Xian had always been by her side and had seen the conflict between her and the High Profound Class students? In his way, David protected her. Yiqing Luo's charming eyes were filled with a faint smile as she looked towards Xiao Jin and the others. I'll head over first. Xiao Jin and the others waved their hands. Yiqing Luo leaped down from the second floor and landed beside the nine-tailed fox. That soft white tail curled up Yiqing Luo and placed her firmly on its back. The surrounding people started to draw in breaths as well as those pairs of envious gazes. The one and only sacred beast nine-tailed fox had become this woman's mount. Those students from the High Profound Class were even more dumbfounded. Especially those two female students who provoked Yiqing Luo, their faces were ashen. Earlier they were still saying that Yiqing Luo and Diamo Xian had no relationship at all. Now, Diamo Xian had sent his own war pet and guardian over to personally invite Yiqing Luo. That incomparably valuable war pet, even voluntarily became Yiqing Luo's mount. Chapter 493. Wind, aren't you leaving together? Yiqing Luo looked at Wind, who was still standing on the second floor, as she asked. Wind's expression seemed to have turned gloomy as he snorted. Other than the Overlord, no one else can sit on Little Nine's back. Yiqing Luo's pupils contracted slightly. The hand which was on Little Nine's back gently brushed past the soft white fur on its back. Other than Diamo Xian, no one else could sit on Little Nine's back. But from the first time she met Little Nine, she had been accepted by Little Nine. Was it because of Diamo Xian? Why did she have a feeling that she had been reserved by Diamo Xian right from the start? Just thinking about it made her a little shy. Ah Feng's words once again shocked the surrounding onlookers. Other than the overlord, no one else could sit on the noble nine-tailed fox's back. But Yiqing Luo was automatically rolled onto the back by the nine-tailed fox. This was enough to show how much the overlord valued her. What is the relationship between Yi family's 7th miss and the overlord? I heard that they are master and disciple, but this feeling doesn't seem like master and disciple. Yes, 7th miss. Didn't she set a marriage agreement with Duke Ping, but her sister stole her away? It's only been a few days and yes, 7th miss and the overlord. As they discussed, the discussion changed the topic. Not knowing who started it, someone actually started to compare Yiqing Jian and Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Jian's slutty behavior had spread far and wide. These surrounding crowd all believed that Yi family's young miss and Yiqing Jian were slutty. But because of the overlord's face, they didn't say it out loud. Yiqing Luo laughed lightly as she dug her ears. Her half-squinted eyes reflected a sharp blade as she looked at the commoners who were gathering below. The relationship between me and the overlord has nothing to do with you. If this mouth only knows how to make irresponsible remarks, then I don't mind leading my brothers to seal your mouths tightly. Her sonorous and powerful voice was extremely dignified. Every single word was like a huge bell, striking heavily on their eardrums, their hearts. The surrounding 100 miles around heavenly fortune fell into silence. The silence that surrendered to Yiqing Luo's majestic aura. Yiqing Luo scoffed and patted Little Nine's back. Little Nine, let's go. As his voice fell, a stream of chi rose from Little Nine's 4 limbs. In the blink of an eye, he had already leaped into the sky, turned into a white shadow, and disappeared from everyone's line of sight. At this moment, Ah Feng glanced sideways at the hyperfound class students and finally stopped at Lu Xuelan. Lu Xuelan's entire body trembled. She was terrified and her eyes were filled with shock. However, Ah Feng only paused for a few breaths before looking away. Lord Di Zun asked me to tell you to bring our drunk brothers back to the attic to have a good rest. After saying this, Ah Feng turned around and jumped down from the first floor, leaving the Tianfuan directly. Everyone was shocked. What did these people have to do with the overlord? Why does it feel like they have a very close relationship with the overlord? Shengguan Fang Yi, who had previously suspected that they were students of the devil class, also turned pale. So, these people were all Dmo Xian's men. It was Dmo Xian who had sent people from the imperial palace to form a team for Yiqing Luo. Qiao Jin and the others were first stunned, as they didn't understand what was going on. Their brains spun and they immediately understood the overlord's intention. If the hyperfound class 2 students found out that they were students of the devil class, then the academy would definitely take notice of the devil class. If before the interclass competition, the director forcefully allocated them into different classes, then all the hard work that the devil class had put in for so many years would be meaningless. Rather than being guessed that they were students of the devil class, it would be better to be misunderstood as people from the imperial palace. In this way, at least in future, when they accepted the mercenary group's missions, they wouldn't need to think of ways to hide. Chapter 494. Little Nine came to a stop in a garden filled with beautiful flowers. Yiqing Luo had never been to this place before. As far as the eye could see, there were all kinds of flowers blooming brilliantly. The air was filled with the fragrance of flowers. When Yiqing Luo turned back, Little Nine's figure was no longer by her side. Yiqing Luo surveyed the surroundings and there wasn't a single figure in sight. What was Dmo Xian up to? Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and was about to follow the path ahead to look for Dmo Xian. Suddenly she felt a weight on her shoulder, and a warm body completely wrapped around her in his arms. That fresh and elegant sandalwood scent, mixed with the fresh floral scent, seeped into her nose and was especially intoxicating. It was just a day of not seeing each other. When she felt the warmth of the man behind her, Yiqing Luo actually had a kind of... The empty space in her heart was filled up. Satisfied. Extremely satisfied. Obviously. It wasn't the first time they had not met for such a long time. But this time she missed him so much. Perhaps it was because this time she was the one who made Dmo Xian leave. Not knowing why, Yiqing Luo's eyes were slightly red and the tip of her nose was a little sour. She bit her lips and struggled to turn around from the man's arms. Raising her head, a pair of watery eyes stared deeply at the man's peerless face. This look made Yiqing Luo stunned. His face was as handsome as usual. His eyes were glistening, suffused with a current that could take one's soul away. But, not knowing why, Yiqing Luo felt that there was a trace of exhaustion between his brows. A very, very light exhaustion. This kind of him looked extremely lazy. Seeing Yiqing Luo staring at him in a daze, Dmo Xian's thin lips curled up as his fingertips caressed Yiqing Luo's face. Why looking at me in a daze? His deep voice was sexy and magnetic. Like a feather, constantly teasing Yiqing Luo's heart. I thought, you are angry with me and not willing to talk to me. Yiqing Luo hugged his waist and buried her face in his chest. Dmo Xian's large palm covered the back of Yiqing Luo's head as his thin lips curled into an even more seductive arc. I also thought I would be angry with you. The hand which he circled around Yiqing Luo's waist increased in strength. He thought he would be angry. He was angry that when Yiqing Luo made the decision, she had never thought about his feelings. He was angry that Yiqing Luo didn't listen to his advice and insisted on taking the risk. He was angry that Yiqing Luo didn't care about her own safety, making him worried but helpless. He was angry but he could not bear to be angry. The moment he forcefully stopped Yiqing Luo from accepting the mission and turned around to leave, he regretted it. But Dmo Xian knew that if he were to turn back, Yiqing Luo would not hesitate to choose to proceed with the mission immediately. You're too competitive. Dmo Xian sighed softly as his 5 fingers plunged into Yiqing Luo's hair, as his fingertips gently caressed her hair. I know, even if I really stopped you from going to Death God Castle, your heart is still unable to let go of this mission. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and had no words to refute. Indeed. In order to not let Dmo Xian worry, she could give up this task. But in her heart, she could not truly let go of this task. In her world, there was no such thing as giving up. Perhaps it could be said that she had never met anyone who could make her give up on her decision. If you're unhappy, I can. Yiqing Luo buried her head and rubbed against his chest. It was just a mission, it could not be compared to Dmo Xian. Chapter 495. Dmo Xian's fingers were slender and fair. Perhaps it was because he had been cultivating for many years, his fingertips were slightly calloused. When it rubbed against Yiqing Luo's tender lips, it actually brought along a burst of electric current. Yiqing Luo only felt a ball of raging fire burning on her lips. His pure and deep peach blossom eyes that were like obsidian rippled with ripples. Yiqing Luo turned her head away, trying to avoid Dmo Xian's fingers. But he increased his strength as his fingertips rubbed against her lips. His fingertips were faintly hooking her lips. Yiqing Luo's throat tightened and she had just opened her mouth when his fingers brushed past her pearly white teeth. This action made Yiqing Luo's cheeks flushed red. She flew into a rage out of embarrassment as she opened her mouth and bit the man's fingers as she stared at him resentfully. Biting the man's fingers, her words were unclear. Stop fooling around. Dmo Xian's face was filled with an unconcealable smile. The tiredness between his brows was also dispelled in his smile. He lowered his head as he got closer to Yiqing Luo. His smile was filled with evilness. His voice was filled with bewitchment. What is Lil Luo trying to say? The warm breath sprayed onto her neck. Yiqing Luo couldn't take this kind of teasing as both her hands struggled to push against the man's chest. It's not that I don't rely on you, but at the same time when I rely on you, I want to improve, want to become stronger, want to become your reliance. A soft sigh was heard from the top of her head. Dmo Xian helplessly let go of Yiqing Luo as his face was filled with a helpless expression. I knew it. I would eventually be convinced by you. A piece of white cloth landed into Yiqing Luo's hands. Yiqing Luo was puzzled as she opened up the white cloth. When she saw the pictures on the white cloth, she was completely dazed. This is... Yiqing Luo's breathing suddenly turned hurried as her fingers clenched the white cloth tightly as she raised her eyes and stared at Dmo Xian. This is Death God Castle's map? This was a piece of map. On it was a detailed drawing of a place's layout. Even the mechanisms and arrays in every place were clearly marked. My entire life has been ruined by you. Dmo Xian helplessly encircled Yiqing Luo in his arms again. His shimmering peach blossom eyes seemed to be carrying thousands of spring water. Although his voice was filled with helplessness, it was possible to hear the strong doting under the helplessness. This kind of pampering could only be enjoyed by Yiqing Luo alone. Yiqing Luo's heart seemed to be pinched by something. She stared at the map in her hand. Yiqing Luo held a thin white cloth in her hand and felt as though it weighed 1,000 kilograms. It was so heavy that she found it difficult to breathe. After he stopped her from taking the mission, he left angrily. He wasn't really angry, he just didn't want to talk to her. Instead, he drew the entire map of Death God Castle for her. To reduce the chances of her getting hurt. Clearly, he was extremely worried and didn't want her to go to Death God Castle for this mission. But in order to make her happy, in order to let her buy the mission, he had to put his heart at ease. In the end, he compromised. How could she not be moved by such a man? How could she not fall for him? He was always like this. His casual words and actions for her always stirred her heart, making her unable to think about anything else. Ah Xian, thank you. Out of thousands of words, only this sentence was able to express the feeling in her heart. Yiqing Luo's arms circled around Dmo Xian's neck as she proactively offered her pink lips. She shut her eyes and a crystal-clear tear rolled down from the corner of her eye. Chapter 496. A Kiss Lingering. Dmo Xian seemed to want to knead her into his bones and blood as his arms wrapped around her tightly. Yiqing Luo's cheeks were flushed red and her eyes were like silk as she fell into his arms. A pair of slender hands that were wrapped around Dmo Xian's neck rested weakly on his chest. In her ears, the man's deep voice as if tasting a jar of sweet wine, so seeping into her heart, making her dizzy, making her intoxicated. Lil Luo, don't thank me. Why don't you repay me with your body? Yiqing Luo's pupils suddenly widened. His heart violently trembled and then began to beat faster. She stared blankly at Dmo Xian's pair of affectionate eyes. That scorching gaze was like a flame, burning her body and mind. He was serious. Was this a marriage proposal? Did he mean that he wanted to marry her? Yiqing Luo's cheeks flushed red and those curly long eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. What was concealed was a pair of shy and charming eyes. Marrying Dmo Xian was something that she had never thought about. He only felt that it was enough for two people to be together, to know each other, to love each other. Little Luo, Dmo Xian's slender fingers clasped onto her lower jaw, and that jet-black pupils gradually turned dense. Don't tell me you've never thought of becoming my wife? Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes innocently. We haven't known each other for long and we don't have a complete understanding of each other. Talking about marriage. Isn't it a little too early? It's not early. Without any hesitation, he directly interrupted Yiqing Luo's words. From the moment I got together with you, I had already decided to accompany you for life. That voice was sonorous and firm. Yiqing Luo's heart was shaken once again. His heart was in a mess, so messed up that he couldn't think of anything else. As expected, Qiao Jin and the others were right. Beside Dmo Xian she was like a woman, a real woman. He had always been independent and was used to being alone. But in front of Dmo Xian, there was a woman's emotions and mentality. This kind of feeling only Dmo Xian could give her. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers curled up Dmo Xian's robe bit by bit. She raised her head and gazed at Dmo Xian's smooth chin, the elegant lines. Ah Xian, how long? Is a lifetime? However long you want, I'll let you. Dmo Xian caressed her cheek. His fingertips were slightly cold and his pair of peach blossom eyes were so gentle that it seemed as if water could be squeezed out. His gaze became increasingly fiery. Yiqing Luo's cheeks turned even redder. It was as long as he wanted it to be. She knew that Dmo Xian was never one to make promises recklessly. The fact that he said those words represented his determination. Yiqing Luo's heart was filled with warmth because of Dmo Xian's words. She held on to Dmo Xian's hand, her 5 fingers interlocked with his. Her smiling eyes gazed at the hands of the two people who were holding each other's hands. She smiled and said, "All right, I'm willing to marry you." Dmo Xian was overjoyed. His large palm grasped Yiqing Luo's little hand. His long arms tightened, his long and narrow peach blossom eyes slightly raised. That head of cloud-like black hair was unbound and scattered over his half-exposed chest. His entire person looked extremely seductive. Lil Luo, you're really? Before he could finish his words. But he saw Yiqing Luo's pink lips curled up slightly as a crafty look flashed past her lively eyes. But there's a prerequisite to marry you. Dmo Xian narrowed his eyes, realizing that Yiqing Luo's following words were absolutely not what he wanted to hear. Chapter 497. Dmo Xian's status was too distinguished. As Dmo Xian's wife, the mistress of the imperial palace, she must have the ability to match her status. Even if Dmo Xian didn't mind. But it didn't mean that the people in the imperial palace didn't mind. Just like Wind. She could tell that Wind didn't have any good feelings towards her. It could even be described as disdain. She didn't blame Wind for looking at her in this way. It was because Wind valued Dmo Xian and the imperial palace that he developed enmity towards her. If she had the ability to match with Dmo Xian, and had the qualification to become the mistress of the imperial palace, Wind would definitely not develop such feelings. Xian, wait for me. When I have the qualification to stand by your side, when I have the qualification to become the mistress of the imperial palace, when everyone believes in me, then let's get married, alright? Yiqing Luo's lips rose slightly, her eyes were filled with a luster, revealing a resolute look. She and Dmo Xian were actually the same type of people. From the moment they decided to be together, she had no intention to leave Dmo Xian. The current them was only lacking a status. Today's words, I will remember it in my heart. Yiqing Luo's eyes, like the vast firmament, was dyed with the luster of stars, that resplendent, that unwavering. She stretched out her other hand and twirled a lock of Dmo Xian's black hair. That wispy black hair curled around her slender and fair fingers. Dmo Xian, I'm not a generous woman and I'm narrow-minded. If you're willing to wait for me no matter how long the road ahead is, I will always be by your side and will always pester you. Dmo Xian's narrow long eyes curved as it grew deeper. Gazing at the lady in his arms, no matter how resplendent it was, it couldn't be compared to the dazzling gleam in her eyes. Her cheeks were flushed as her face was filled with shyness. But she had to stubbornly put on a fierce look, saying words that moved his heart. Unfortunately, he loved this look of Yiqing Luo's. Love to the bones. He had always felt that Yiqing Luo had a kind of magical power. That magnetic attraction, enticing him bit by bit, to place her in his eyes, into his heart. Just as Dmo Xian was gazing deeply at Yiqing Luo's fierce look, his body suddenly leaned backwards. He was pushed into the bushes. Shortly after, the woman's soft and delicate body covered his. Because of the two people's actions, the flowers in the surroundings lifted up circles of flower petals and drifted with the wind. Yiqing Luo sat on his abdomen with one hand on his chest, her 5 fingers gripped tightly onto his lapel. So, Dmo Xian, you can't escape. Dmo Xian's arms circled around her waist as he laid on the ground. His jet black hair spread out, which made his face look even more magnificent. His lips curled as he said word by word, Yiqing Luo, you'd better be mentally prepared. Dmo Xian will never let you off in this lifetime. Yiqing Luo nodded and imitated the way he used to tease her as she caressed his lips. Then, let's continue pestering each other till death. The two of them looked at each other and smiled warmly. Her fingers hooked onto Dmo Xian's chin as she bent down and with a sweet smile, she kissed his lips. This kiss was filled with passion. At the same time in the mansion, Long Yunzhan and the others who were sober, along with a few waiters from Heavenly Fortune Inn, carried the drunk youngsters back to their respective rooms. With the identity of Imperial Palace's people, there was no need for them to be secretive, not daring to let others know where they were staying. And it was because they were related to the Imperial Palace that the waiters' attitude towards them was diligent and earnest, almost not daring to accept money. Seeing the eager waiters coming and going, Long Yunzhan's expression turned darker. Chapter 498. Long Yunzhan's brows creased slightly as he heard the voice and looked over. He saw Xiao Jin standing by his side with one hand on his shoulder. He glanced sideways and met Xiao Jin's eyes. His elegant brows creased even tighter. Xiao Jin's gaze towards him was unprecedentedly solemn and serious. As though he had seen through his soul, seeing through his deepest thoughts. This feeling of having all his thoughts seen through made Long Yunzhan very unhappy. His heart produced a flustered feeling. In his heart, what secret was he hiding? Why was he so against the feeling of Xiao Jin seeing through him? Group leader. Xiao Jin opened his mouth solemnly as the fingers on his shoulder tightened a little. There's something regarding Qing Luo I want to discuss with you. Long Yunzhan pursed his lips as he nodded indifferently. The two of them walked into Long Yunzhan's room one after another. Xiao Jin's expression was calm as he stared at Long Yunzhan without blinking. Do you want to develop the world group? Long Yunzhan narrowed his eyes, not understanding the meaning behind Xiao Jin's words. You're the belief of the students in Devil class. After Qing Luo came to Devil class, she's the hope of Devil class students. Xiao Jin walked to the chair and sat down. His voice was very soft and indifferent, without any emotions. I've always thought that the reason why we train Devil class students is to make them strong, to let them believe in themselves that they're not trash. Xiao Jin raised his eyes and stared at Long Yunzhan, who was standing by the side with his hands behind his back. Although, I know that the reason why you train Devil class isn't so simple. Long Yunzhan was stunned. Between them, they had never asked each other the reason why they stayed in Devil class. From first meeting to getting to know each other through Discord and finally becoming brothers. Everything seemed to be going with the flow. This was the first time they were discussing the reason why they trained devil class. No matter what your reason is, I know that your heart towards everyone is sincere. Xiao Jin continued, you're not someone who is good at expressing your thoughts. Perhaps even you yourself don't know your own thoughts. Long Yunzhan's heart trembled fiercely. Xiao Jin actually understood him so well. Devil class or the world group, we are a team, a collective. We have belief, we have hope. With the both of you leading devil class, the world group, it's destined to be extraordinary. Xiao Jin's gaze gradually became gentle. Devil class is able to be so harmonious now, forming the world group. All these are all because of Qing Luo's hope. His deep eyes flickered slightly, and he placed his hands on the wooden table. His face, which could not be considered handsome, was solemn and respectful. Zhan, we have a good brother. A very, very good brother. Xiao Jin stared into Long Yunzhan's eyes as he enunciated each word clearly. There were some things that he couldn't say too clearly. If Yi Qing Luo didn't have Dmo Xian by her side, he could remind Long Yunzhan, or even help Long Yunzhan chase after Yi Qing Luo. But there were no ifs. Their relationship with Yi Qing Luo could only stop at the level of brothers. Only by using these two words would they be able to walk for a longer period of time. Perhaps it was because Xiao Jin emphasized the word brother. It hinted at something to Long Yunzhan, and Long Yunzhan seemed to understand something. That pair of azure blue eyes flickered with a slightly dim luster. His eyelids drooped as his voice was cold and emotionless, and Qing Luo is indeed a very good brother. Indeed very good. If it wasn't for Yi Qing Luo's appearance, devil class would probably still not know what unity was until now. There would still be that mentality of the weak being prey to the strong. It was Yi Qing Luo, this ray of hope, that still entered devil class. They were brothers, which meant they could only be brothers. Chapter 499. The next day in the mansion. The youths were dressed neatly and lined up in the courtyard, listening to Yan Xiaoyi's slogan as they did their morning exercise. When Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian walked into the mansion hand in hand, they heard a series of impassioned young voices. Vaguely, a clear voice could be heard. Do you usually have to start training so early? I want to train with you. I really didn't choose the wrong person. I made the right choice to join this world group. Stepping into the courtyard, Zhang Xian saw rows of youths stretching their bodies. Mo Han Shang changed into the world group's uniform and stood in the middle of the group. It seemed that after last night's meal and drinking, his relationship with his brothers had deepened a lot. When the youngsters heard the commotion, they all turned towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. When they saw Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian, although the youngsters didn't stop what they were doing, but their pair of eyes were staring straight at Yi Qing Luo. Finally, it landed on her and Dmo Xian's interlocked fingers. The arch. Xiao Jin took the lead to go up as he cupped his fists towards Dmo Xian as he greeted him. Following that, his vision shifted onto Yi Qing Luo as his eyes were filled with ridicule. Qing Luo, does this mean that you've settled the overlord? Yi Qing Luo rolled her eyes at him. Not returning for an entire night, a man and a woman alone, tisk tisk. Yan Xiaoyi raised her eyebrows and laughed. This tease caused the youths who were still doing their morning exercise to laugh out loud. Dmo Xian's face was plastered with human skin. His facial features were ordinary, but the imposing manner of his whole body was awe-inspiring. He looked calmly at the youths in the courtyard and smiled. We are all brothers of Lil Luo. There is no need to be so courteous. Just call me Brother D. The youths were dumbfounded. All of them stopped their stretching actions and stared at Dmo Xian in shock. He seemed to be unable to believe what he had just heard. Calling Dizun his brother? Are you sure this isn't an illusion? The youths could no longer remain calm. What a joke. Who could remain calm when they could be brothers with His Majesty, the Overlord, who was so high and mighty that everyone wanted to ride on his coattails? They were able to get to know the Overlord and see the Overlord himself. That was all thanks to Qing Luo. Even Xiao Jin was stunned by the words, Brother D. Just as everyone was staring at Dmo Xian, their faces filled with worship, they heard a cold voice. Lord D has already agreed to the world group to accept this high-grade rare mission? This voice was the guild leader's voice. The youths all turned their heads to look at Long Yunzhan. In the hearts of the youths, Long Yunzhan was their faith, their boss. When they heard Long Yunzhan still call him Dizun respectfully, they naturally suppressed the excitement they felt from calling him brother. After hearing Long Yunzhan's question, the smiles on the faces of the youths gradually froze. Advanced rare quest. The mission to Death God Castle. Yiqing Luo gave them a night's time to think. But they were so drunk last night that they didn't even think about it. It was just that when they woke up this morning, they endured the hangover and discussed it together. But in his heart, he was still uncertain. The moment Long Yunjian brought up this topic, the youth started to get nervous again. Yes, Xian agreed. Yiqing Luo's vision swept across the courtyard, those young and tender-looking, slightly pale faces. Have you all thought it through? When the youngsters met Yiqing Luo's gaze, they all lowered their eyelids. They had been undergoing closed-door training in Devil class for the past few years. Actual combat training was merely going to Heavenly Training Forest for simple practical training. They were confident that they were no longer the waste in the past. But after all, they were just kids who hadn't seen the world. Chapter 500. Go. Why shouldn't we go? Under the silence, Tong Ziqing's brows creased tightly as her cold expression was filled with determination. We are members of the World Group, members who are going to become the #1 mercenary group in future, the World Group. It's just a mission and we're afraid of this and that. Her tone was filled with impatience. Didn't you say that we should all work together and work hard to improve? Why is it that when we meet with any danger, all of you become like cowards? After Tong Ziqing finished her words, those youngsters all raised their heads as their emotions were complicated. I agree with Sister Ziqing's words. And Rua Pan, who was standing at the corner of the group, took a step forward. Her pair of gentle eyes stared at Yiqing Luo without blinking as she spoke in a serious tone. We are Devil Classes students, members of the World Group. If a mission is enough to scare us until we stop here, then there's no meaning in us establishing the World Group. The youngsters looked at each other in dismay as their eyes sparkled. Their gazes subconsciously shot towards Xiao Jin and the others. They were used to having the 4 members of the class committee making decisions for them, and this habit had already seeped into their bones. But Xiao Jin and the others didn't open their mouths to speak. Xiao Jin and the others only stood there, as though this matter didn't concern them. Their hearts started to palpitate apprehensively. Seeing these youngsters' ardent gazes, Xiao Jin and the others finally understood why Yiqing Luo intentionally let these youngsters choose on their own. As Devil Classes students, members of the World Group, following the group leader's orders and listening obediently was indeed a good thing. But they were humans, an individual, everyone's brothers. They didn't know how to think for themselves, only following orders and relying on their decisions. If this went on, the World Group would only become a tool to complete the mission. Without the youngsters' vitality and passion. At this moment, Xiao Jin couldn't help but sigh at Yiqing Luo's valiance. In just a short 1 month, she had found out all the problems which they hadn't been able to find out for the past few years. Furthermore, she used the simplest and crudest method to correct these problems. In the courtyard there was a deathly silence. Yiqing Luo let go of Dmo Xian's hand as she slowly walked towards the youngsters. Her charming eyes seemed as though it was decorated with stars, extremely dazzling. This wisp of dazzling light was like a sharp blade that deeply sliced towards the enemy in their hearts. Soon after, he heard your cold voice floating in the courtyard. This time we didn't go home. Instead, we gathered here and formed a mercenary group. What is the purpose of this? The youths looked at each other. After a long time, a young man's voice trembled. It's for actual combat training. Someone said the first sentence and a few others followed. In order to participate in the interclass competition 8 months later, I'll form a mercenary group to accept missions and enrich my combat experience. In order to make myself stronger so that I can take the championship in the interclass competition 8 months from now. As they spoke, the expressions on their faces gradually changed from uneasiness to a complicated one. Slowly it became quiet. It was until the young man quietened down when Yiqing Luo bore an extremely shallow smile as she nodded her head. Yes, for actual combat training, to enrich your combat experience, to make you stronger. Her smile was obviously very shallow. Her tone was clearly indifferent. Her face was clearly devoid of emotion. Chapter 501. That's right. Ridicule, ridicule. Yiqing Luo's words didn't conceal these 2 kinds of emotions at all. This kind of emotion made these youngsters who had strong self-esteem unable to tolerate it. Death God Castle is even scarier than the interclass competitions? Yiqing Luo's slender brows rose slightly as she gave a smile which didn't look like a smile. Do you think that as long as one is able to cultivate some profound qi and train according to the rules every day, that person would be called a strong one? The youngsters bit their lips as they wanted to rebuke her. But Yiqing Luo totally didn't give them a chance to speak as she directly continued, "The so-called strong, which one of them hadn't walked on the tip of the blade? Why do I need to organize everyone to undergo actual combat training? Haven't the days that you've spent in the past taught you about the weak being prey to the strong, and the strong being revered? Facing a real battle that's risking your life. From the moment you chose to cultivate profound qi, choosing to be above others, concentrating on training, you're destined to tread on this path of bloodshed. This path is paved with the blood and corpses of numerous weaklings. If you don't want to become one of these corpses and don't want to become someone else's stepping stone, then work hard to make yourself stronger. The only way to live on is to become stronger. Because from the moment you chose this path, there's no way of retreat. Either you die or the enemy dies." Sentence after sentence, it was like a bombardment. The youngsters' faces revealed an ashamed look. They were no longer the waste that they were in the past. Thinking that one day they would stand in front of those people who had once humiliated them, teaching them a harsh lesson. Thinking about it now, this kind of thinking was really too childish. They thought that they were already a strong one. But when they met danger, they were so afraid that they wanted to retreat, so they were simply cowards. Elder sister is right. Kitty Lee clapped her little hands furiously as her sparkling eyes looked at Yiqing Luo with adoration. How can there be such a good thing under the heavens, wanting to be above others without putting in any effort? Which strong one hasn't walked out of bloodshed? Profound cultivators who haven't experienced life and death are not fit to be called strong. These words made the youngsters feel even more ashamed. Yiqing Luo remained silent for a long time. It wasn't until these youths' faces were completely red and they wished for nothing more than to dig a hole to hide in that she slowly said, "Now there's finally an opportunity before your eyes. Do you want this opportunity or not?" "Yes. No matter how dangerous it is. If you haven't tried, how do you know it won't work?" The hot blood in the hearts of the youths was completely ignited. If he didn't want to pay, how could he get anything in return? If he was afraid of everything, how could he talk about becoming strong? He wanted to comprehend, to advance, to become stronger. He had to comprehend everything when he was close to death again and again. They followed Yiqing Luo and established the world group. Wasn't it for actual combat training? Wasn't it to become stronger? Because of a death god castle, they actually forgot their original intentions. However, this opportunity is not something that everyone can have. Yiqing Luo looked at everyone's excitement, no longer revealing that timid look when she heard about Death God Castle yesterday, as her lips curled into a smile. Her gaze swept past the young faces in front of her, as she imprinted those youngsters' unwavering gazes into her heart. Death God Castle is very dangerous, and there's a possibility that we might meet with another wave of unknown danger. I can't bear to send you to your deaths for nothing. When Yiqing Luo said that, the youngsters were all stunned. What did she mean by this? Chapter 502. Looking at the youngsters' puzzled gazes, Yiqing Luo gave a faint laugh. This mission naturally has to be done, but the members who take part in this mission must be at Mystic Profound 5th grade and above, and their skills must be assessed by Jianghu and Xiaoyi. For a moment, the youth's expressions changed. It wasn't easy to reignite my blood. It wasn't easy for them to boil over. This is very draining of willpower, okay. Before you have enough strength, relying on your hot-bloodedness will only be courting death. After Yiqing Luo saw this mission, she already had this idea in her heart. If one was Mystic Profound grade 5 or above, and their skills and overall strength weren't bad, even if something really happened, they would at least have the ability to protect themselves. At that time she would summon Shiju and bring everyone away. At least it could ensure everyone's safety. Yiqing Luo ignored the despondent and frenzied expressions on their faces. From now on, Mystic Profound 5th grade cultivators, stand on my side. More than 60 young men and women began to stand apart. Not long later, Yiqing Luo's side stood around 20 over people. On the other side, the youths were looking at them pitifully, but there was nothing they could do. If they didn't have enough strength, they would only be a burden. It didn't matter if he lost his life, but if he harmed the team and caused the mission to fail, then the loss would outweigh the gain. These 20 over people were thrown to Qiao Jin and Yan Xiaoyi for them to personally test these people's skills. Under the training of Long Yunzhan and the class committee for the past few years, these people's profound level and their own strength were rather compatible. After about a morning, the youths who would participate in the rare high-level mission had been selected. 22 youths were chosen. Adding Qiao Jin, Yan Xiaoyi and Yiqing Luo, there was a total of 25 people. Don't be depressed. After Yiqing Luo had chosen these people, she then looked towards the other side, looking at those youngsters who were looking at them anxiously. We only have these 3 days to earn the mercenary group's honor points. After these 3 days, it won't be so easy for us to earn honor points. They were going back to the Heavenly Academy 3 days later. Although they could leave the academy without anyone noticing, if a large group of students were to leave too many times, it would inevitably attract the attention of the academy. It was too dangerous. They had just established a mercenary group, so honor points were extremely important. If their honor points remained stagnant for a long period of time, the mercenary guild might even demote them or cancel their right to establish a mercenary group. Moreover, this advanced rare mission might not even be completed. An ordinary mercenary group can accept 5 missions at the same time. Leader and Yu Ying will lead the remaining members, or you can choose to lead the team in groups to accept low-level and mid-level missions. A smile finally appeared on the faces of the youths. Fortunately, they did not have to sit in the courtyard and wait. They could also contribute to the mercenary group. Towards Yiqing Luo's suggestion, the few of them had no objections. The young members naturally had no objections. After assigning the tasks, Yiqing Luo and the other 25 people also started to take action. Yiqing Luo rejected DMO Xian. She knew that if DMO Xian was around, the team's chances of safety would increase. But she was even more clear that if any accident were to happen, DMO Xian would not hesitate to choose to bring her away. Moreover, with DMO Xian around, these members wouldn't have that kind of pressing sense of life and death. DMO Xian didn't refute and just handed little Nine over to her. In order to help Long Yunzhan transform into his dragon form, Chi had exhausted all of her holy beast powers. She had been in a deep slumber for a long time and showed no signs of waking up. Although Shiju was a mirage beast, it was only a low-tier mirage beast after all, and its beast age was only that of a child. Chapter 503. Yiqing Luo didn't reject Little Nine. Little Nine turned into a white furball as it sat on Yiqing Luo's shoulder. That furry feeling made Yiqing Luo miss Chi, who was still in deep slumber in the pet space. Not knowing when Chi would wake up from her deep slumber, Yiqing Luo sighed softly. Jin Zi, how's the investigation on the matter which I asked you to investigate? On the way to Death God Castle, Yiqing Luo turned her head to look at Xiao Jin, who was walking behind her. Xiao Jin shook his head slowly. The Mercenary Association's secrecy is done very well. The person who issued the mission cannot be found out. He paused for a moment as he glanced sideways at Emo Han Shang, who was in the group, and said, as for the person who issued the mission, Han Shang doesn't know. Emo Han Shang's lips pursed as his handsome face revealed a sliver of guilt. I'm sorry? Although I'm the young patriarch of the Mercenary Association, but regarding the matters of accepting and issuing the mission, I have no right to know. No matter. Yiqing Luo waved her hand. You've joined the World Group, so you're an ordinary member of the World Group. I don't wish to make use of your special authority to seek for anything for the World Group. Emo Han Shang's eyelashes fluttered as his handsome brows seemed to be covered with a layer of moisture. As compared to a lady's eyes, it was even more radiant. His lips twitched, and after some time he finally said, thank you. Yiqing Luo smiled as her eyelids drooped down tightly. But I discovered that Yuqi Peng is very concerned about this mission. Xiao Jin recalled the matter which he met with when he was inquiring about it. Duke Jing is keeping watch at the Mercenary Association, waiting for us to give up on this mission so that he can take it up in time. Yuqi Peng's apparently confident look indicated that he absolutely had a way to complete this mission. Otherwise he wouldn't be so persistent on this dangerous mission. Anyone with eyes who saw Death God Castle knew that this was a mission with a slim chance of survival. Yiqing Luo's fingers suddenly clenched into a fist. She had personally witnessed Yuqi Peng's confidence. She wanted to head over to Yuqi Peng's place to find out more information. But upon recalling that mysterious and unfathomable dark forces, Yiqing Luo dispelled this thought. As compared to Death God Castle, that strange dark force was much more terrifying. If Yuqi Peng learned from Yiqing Ling and gathered the dark force's energy onto something, even though it was brought along Yiqing Luo, it was too dangerous. Suddenly a thought struck her and her eyes widened. Yes, the power of the dark forces. Logically speaking, the owner of the exquisite pagoda shouldn't dare to play tricks on the Mercenary Union. If the one who issued the mission for the exquisite pagoda wasn't the owner of the exquisite pagoda? Yuqi Peng was so confident, perhaps he was relying on the power of the dark forces? Did the dark forces agree to help him complete this mission? That mysterious organization, everything mysterious, to be able to make a soul exchange with one noble person after another without anyone noticing, and to bestow upon them a strange power. If he recalled the Death God Castle and took the exquisite pagoda, it was not impossible. This dark force was really too strange. Was it because the exquisite pagoda was no longer in the Death God Castle, or was Yu Qipeng relying on the power of the dark forces? Wait a minute, the exquisite pagoda should still be in Death God Castle. Yiqing Luo took out the map that Dmo Xian had specially drawn for her. She had an eidetic memory so she could quickly construct the entire map in her mind. But Death God Castle's terrain was too complicated. Chapter 504. The map that Dmo Xian drew was specially made in the simplest way, allowing her to swiftly remember everything on the entire map. Even if it was a tiny mechanism, he would mark it clearly. Yiqing Luo's fingertips gently touched the white cloth. Every stroke of the drawing seemed to still have his warmth left on it. This man. He was extremely meticulous. He went to Death God Castle and explored the entire Death God Castle, which also proved that Dmo Xian had the ability to come and go as he pleased in Death God Castle. He was even able to activate all the mechanisms and arrays and was still safe and sound. Death God Castle was totally unable to contain Dmo Xian. Dmo Xian passed the map to her, which meant that the exquisite pagoda was still kept in Death God Castle. The reason why Yu Qipeng was so confident was because he intended to borrow the dark force's power. Actually, Dmo Xian could totally take out the exquisite pagoda and pass it to her to complete the mission. But Dmo Xian didn't do so. Instead, he drew the map in detail. Dmo Xian was paving the way for her. Because Dmo Xian understood her. The meaning of the mission was to train the world group and also to train herself. If Dmo Xian took out the exquisite pagoda for Yiqing Luo, this action wasn't really for her own good, so it would lose the meaning of taking on the mission. It was just like what she had said before. A real strong practitioner, which one of them hadn't walked on the blade's edge. There wasn't such a good thing under the heavens to reap rewards without putting in any effort. Not coming into contact with danger, not touching upon life and death. Then how would one comprehend the real path to becoming strong? Her fingertips slowly rubbed against the lines drawn on the map. Suddenly her fingers paused. Her vision congealed on the white cloth. That was marked with red ink, marking the location of the profound chi fluctuation protection mechanism. But the color of this red ink seemed a little wrong. One side was light, while the other was slightly darker. She frowned as she took a careful look. There were indeed two types of seriousness. And this lump of red ink was obviously intentionally drawn on. As though it was to cover something. Cover? That light shade of red? Yiqing Luo's heart suddenly tightened as she felt a suffocating feeling in her throat. Her 5 fingers clenched the white cloth tightly as she pressed it against her chest. This red, could it be blood? In order to cover this blood stain, he specially used red ink to confuse her vision? Was Dmo Xian injured? When she saw the exhaustion in Dmo Xian's eyes in the garden, it wasn't an illusion. He was injured, but he still forced himself to support his body, pretending that nothing had happened. No wonder. When she mentioned rejecting him to tag along, Dmo Xian agreed so readily. He was probably afraid that she would discover the injuries on his body. A warm feeling spread from the bottom of his heart. It followed his heart and flowed in his heart. His heart seemed to be filled with something. It was very, very warm. She tightened her grip on the map as if it was a treasure and put it into her bosom. She must have exhausted all her luck to be so lucky to obtain Dmo Xian's love. Even if it was for Dmo Xian, she would protect herself well and return to see him alive. Dmo Xian, wait for me, Death God Castle. Hidden in the depths of the forest. As far as the eye could see, there were trees everywhere. However, only within a 100-mile radius around Death God Castle, there was not a single blade of grass. That huge Death God Castle was like a majestic main city as it stood in the middle of the empty land. In the vicinity of Death God Castle, there were 10 odd magical beasts with an acute sense of smell walking around. No wonder it was the world's #1 treasured place. No wonder it was the place where numerous world-famous thieves, even the #1 thief saint, had fallen. Chapter 505. Such intense profound chi fluctuations. Yin Shaoi cried out in shock. It wasn't that she was making a fuss out of nothing, but the scene in front of her eyes was simply too shocking. This Death God Castle was indeed as its name suggested. It looked like a place where the Death God congregated, bringing along a dense death chi which was extremely eerie. Whereas in the surroundings of Death God Castle, one could clearly sense the fluctuations of profound chi, which kept on sweeping the surroundings. Luo gathered 20 over youngsters and, according to the map's instructions, stood at the safest place. And this place coincidentally had a panoramic view of the entire Death God Castle. Luo narrowed her eyes as she looked at the surroundings, towards the direction where the profound chi fluctuations were coming from. All of these were marked on the map. Even the time it took for the chi fluctuation device to change direction was clearly marked. This cheat was simply heaven-defying. At this moment, the mercenary group badges effect was displayed. The magical beasts near Death God Castle not only had a sensitive sense of smell, their hearing was also very sensitive. Although there was Chi-Chi's sacred beast Chi as well as Little Nine's sacred beast Prestige by his side, so she wasn't afraid that these magical beasts would hurt them. But, the minute these magical beasts moved, it would definitely attract the attention of Death God Castle's guards. Luo made use of the mercenary group badge's voice transmission function as she spoke in a deep voice. There are profound chi fluctuations mechanisms all around. If the profound chi fluctuations were to sweep past you, you will be sliced into pieces by that energy. 20 over youngsters' expressions changed slightly. Along the way they saw Luo studying the map. It was obvious that DMO Xian allowed Luo to do this mission. Other than leaving Little Nine by her side to protect her, he naturally did something to ensure her safety. This map was given to Luo by DMO Xian. With this map, the youngsters' heavy hearts were more or less soothed. But they had not expected that even with the map facing the heavily guarded Death God Castle, which was filled with mechanisms, they were still helpless. If they were swept, they would be sliced into pieces? This was just too savage. They were unable to grasp the direction of the profound chi fluctuations, and had no way of knowing if they had been swept. How were they going to enter Death God Castle? So from now onwards, all of you better be on high alert. Luo's expression was grave as she squinted her eyes, reflecting a cold gaze. His gaze was like a sharp blade. It ruthlessly pierced into the hearts of more than 20 youths. It was so piercing that they swiftly shifted their gazes onto Luo. At this moment, they must pick up their spirits and fully coordinate with Luo's commands. Every hour, the scanning mechanism for chi fluctuations will rotate once. During the rotation of the direction, the fluctuation of the profound chi is in a static state. At this moment, it is our chance to enter Death God Castle. Luo's charming eyes turned back as her slender little hand covered her chest. He could feel a ball of heat slowly spreading out from his heart. At the same time, her eyes were covered with a layer of misty luster. I saw it. The profound energy surrounding Death God Castle fluctuated. Perhaps it was because her heart had once nurtured an extremely talented profound heart jade. Even if that profound jade heart wasn't in her body, but Luo seemed to have inherited the strength of that extremely strong profound jade heart. Through her profound heart jade, she could see all profound auras that were of a higher level than hers, and she could distinguish the level of a person's profound heart jade. Chapter 506. While the mechanism is rotating, Little Nine will use its current form to attract the other magical beast's attention. Luo rubbed Little Nine on her shoulder and felt its mouth licking her palm before she continued. Restrain all the sacred beast chi and try your best to disguise yourself as a little animal which has no attack power at all. Right, an animal and not a magical beast. A little animal without any attack power, even if it attracted the other magical beast's attention. If it ran away, these magical beasts and guards wouldn't chase after it forcefully. They would only treat it as a passing little animal. Little Nine licked her again. Luo's eyes narrowed as she stared at the top of Death God Castle, at that moving mechanism. About half an incense's time later, Luo's body moved as her arms suddenly raised up. 20 over youngsters instantly congealed their senses. They were paying attention to Luo's hand gestures. Pay attention. Luo's lips curled into a hot-blooded smile. Following that, she shook her shoulders. Little Nine on her shoulder turned into a white lightning as it scurried out. Little Nine's action was extremely huge. It made those bundles of dense bushes rustle 100 miles away. Very quickly, it attracted the attention of 10 over magical beasts. Those magical beasts' eyes shone with a bloodthirsty glint as they leapt up and their four limbs pounced into the bushes. But this pounce was on thin air. The bushes in front started to move rapidly. The magical beasts instantly gave a loud and clear howl as 10 over of them pounced towards the direction of the sound. The magical beast's howls attracted the guards' attention. 2 guards stayed behind while the rest dashed towards the direction where the magical beasts were pursuing. At the same time, Yiqing Luo, who was hiding in the dark, was like a ghost as she silently dashed towards Death God Castle. The 20 over youngsters behind her were paying attention to Yiqing Luo's actions. Although this was their first time taking action together. But it seemed as though they had practiced it countless of times. Under Yiqing Luo's command, the youngsters abruptly got up and followed closely behind Yiqing Luo. Although there were guards standing guard at the entrance, but their gazes were all placed on that team of guards and magical beasts. After all, Death God Castle's reputation was well known, and there was a powerful, profound chi fluctuation mechanism. Ever since the God Thief had fallen here many years ago, there had been very few people who came to challenge Death God Castle. As time went by, the guards began to relax. Unexpectedly, just as their attention was completely placed on that patch of bushes, a group of over 20 people had already perfectly avoided the profound energy fluctuation mechanism and infiltrated Death God Castle. Immediately, gather in the castle. Yiqing Luo shouted coldly, reminding them. The tacit understanding between the 20 youths over the years made them feel no pressure at all. He quickly caught up with the brothers in front of him. When the last young man entered Death God Castle, the direction-changing mechanism coincidentally shifted once again. There was not a moment's difference. If he had been a step slower, the last youth would have been brutally cut off by the mechanism of the profound chi fluctuation. The direction which Yiqing Luo had chosen was the side door which was drawn on the map. This was the canteen where the guards of Death God Castle ate. Apart from mealtimes, there were usually no guards here. It was the safest. After the group of people entered Death God Castle, they instantly felt as if their entire bodies were enveloped by a wave of yin chi. It was indeed Death God Castle. Every place was filled with death energy. Yiqing Luo sized up the surroundings. The interior of Death God Castle was dimly lit, rendering the surroundings even more strange and terrifying. Turn left and go upstairs. The exquisite pagoda is in the third room. Chapter 507. It sounded like it was just a short distance of a few steps. The 20 or so youths could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But Yiqing Luo, who had seen the map, was very clear that this wasn't just a simple left turn up the stairs. The entire Death God Castle was as big as the entire palace. Perhaps it was even bigger than the Imperial Palace. Furthermore, there were all sorts of mechanisms and formations hidden in every corner of the room. It could be said that every step he took was equivalent to a choice between life and death. The interior of Death God Castle was not as strict as the outside. Yiqing Luo led 20 over brothers and walked out of the canteen first. He extended his head and scanned the area with his perception. As there are too many mechanisms and formations in Death God Castle, there are only 2 teams of internal guards. They will search the surroundings every 2 hours, and each round will take at least an hour. In other words, as long as we react quickly enough, these guards won't pose any threat to us. After Yiqing Luo finished her words, she swept a glance behind her, at those youngsters who were concentrating on listening to her. She saw that after hearing her words, they all revealed expressions of relief. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards as she sneered, "Do you know the reason why there are only 2 teams of guards in Death God Castle and every round of search takes such a long time?" The hearts of the youths that had just relaxed immediately tensed up. Yiqing Luo's smile was simply too terrifying. Especially in this kind of atmosphere, it made them feel an inexplicable heavy pressure on their shoulders. An unknown fear grew and spread from the bottom of their hearts. The scariest thing about Death God Castle is the mechanisms and formations that are everywhere. After leaving the canteen, every step you take could possibly trigger a certain mechanism or step into a certain formation. Once you touch these formations and mechanisms, you will die. Yiqing Luo suppressed her voice to a very low and deep level. In this strange atmosphere, it seemed extremely eerie. Among the 20 or so youths, the oldest was only 18 years old and had yet to truly experience life and death. Upon hearing about these formations and mechanisms, they were all shocked. Their bodies stiffened and they felt their hands and feet go cold. Scared, very scared. But under such a fearful situation, these youths actually felt an extremely unfamiliar pleasure. Yes, pleasure. The blood in his body was constantly boiling. The fear in his heart and the burning excitement in his blood fused together, forming an unfamiliar pleasure. Their hands and feet were itching and they had the urge to flex their muscles. These youths did not forget their purpose of coming here. They wanted to become stronger and gain more battle experience. At this moment, this fear of the unknown meant that every step they took represented a dangerous place. It made them afraid, but at the same time, it gave them the thrill of a challenge. What Yiqing Luo wanted was to provoke this feeling in them. Everything needed passion in order to be completed perfectly. What these youths wanted was a passion to become stronger. The cold smile on Yiqing Luo's lips gradually turned into a gratified smile. From now onwards, watch my every step and don't touch anything in the surroundings. All of you just have to remember, our target is the exquisite pagoda. As for other things, no matter how much you like them, do not touch them easily. There were many things here. Once touched, they would become mechanisms. The youths' faces were filled with determination, and they replied calmly, yes. Yiqing Luo's gaze scanned the surroundings vigilantly, and upon realizing that there weren't any traces of guards, she then left the canteen in a flash. Chapter 508. All the mechanisms and arrays on the map were imprinted in Yiqing Luo's mind. Based on her super strong memory and judgment, Yiqing Luo's actions were swift as she nimbly avoided everything as she sped forward. Those 20 youngsters behind her didn't dare to be distracted. They had a tacit understanding, and with just a glance or a gesture, they were able to understand each other's meaning. Because of that, the entire journey up to the second floor was safe. The second floor was a square-shaped long corridor which encircled a circle of rooms with similar designs. Every single room was filled with numerous rare treasures. Every single item would cause many cultivators to fight over it. Yiqing Luo's target was the third room. She searched for the mechanisms and arrays in her mind as she said solemnly, there are a total of 14 rooms on the second floor, and the treasures are more valuable than the first floor. Because of that, the mechanisms and arrays here are much more concentrated than the first floor. The crowd took a deep breath as they didn't dare to be careless. The path to the third room wasn't far, but this path was filled with arrays. The first floor was filled with mechanisms while the second floor was filled with arrays. The walls, floor, and the design of the room were all god-trapping arrays of the 5 elements and 8 trigrams. If it wasn't for those who knew about arrays, they would definitely be trapped to death on the second floor, unable to leave this place until death befalls them. Yiqing Luo suddenly stopped as she flipped her palm. A feather fan slid into her palm. Her fingertips moved slightly as though she was hooking something. The youngsters only felt a flash of silver light and saw a piece of iron wire flying up as it speedily wound itself around the wooden pillar on the roof. Yiqing Luo's fingers moved as that iron wire stretched taut. Yiqing Luo flipped over and climbed up along the iron wire. 20 youngsters followed one after another as they grabbed onto that iron wire as they climbed up the roof. Their movements were extremely light. The clothes which Xianxia specially chose for them were extremely precious, so there wasn't any friction sound at all. The group of them bent down like geckos as they clung onto the roof. Heading towards the third room, the entire path is filled with arrays. Especially the first room's entrance, it's an illusion array. Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes as she glanced downwards at that door, which looked no different from any other ordinary ground. Actually, the tightly shut pattern in the first room was the summoning totem of the illusion array. If she walked through the first room, she would sink into the swamp and never be able to climb out. Because of this, Yiqing Luo chose to climb up from the eaves. Under such a tense and strange atmosphere, the youths broke out in cold sweat, and even their palms were sweating. He kept climbing high up in the sky and kept moving forward. The teenagers were afraid that they would delay the brothers behind them and would not be able to catch up with the team in time, so they did not dare to stop for even a moment. After a long time, the youths only felt that their palms were slippery, as if they would fall from the eaves at any time. Most importantly, the iron wire installed in Yiqing Luo's feather fan was to make use of the iron wire to take someone's life. The forging of the iron wire was extremely sharp. The palms of the youths with slightly more tender skin were cut open, and blood seeped out. Yiqing Luo had lost count of the number of times she had been forced to do it for such a long period of time, so she was long used to it. However, the youths behind him had never gone through any training in high-altitude climbing. They had a lot of endurance, but the sharpness of the iron wire was too much for them to bear. The youngsters clenched their teeth as they looked at the third room, which was just a few feet away, as they forced themselves to climb. When they passed by the second room, before Yiqing Luo could even say a word, that tightly shut door inexplicably blew a strong gust of wind. That strong wind blew against their faces, bringing along a scorching heat. It was as though a ball of raging fire was pouncing towards them. Chapter 509. The youngsters' faces were filled with panic. All of them stretched out their hands in an attempt to grab hold of that young man. But the heat which pounced towards them was getting higher and higher, so much so that they couldn't open their eyes. That young man who had fallen down was about to scream out in terror. But he knew that the minute he screamed out, his bunch of brothers would be discovered. He suppressed the terror in his heart as his gaze swiftly swept past the surroundings. Both his feet had already landed on the ground. No, this wasn't the ground. He saw with his own eyes that his legs seemed to be stuck in the ground, sinking downwards. This illusion array. The second room's ground was also an illusion array. This wasn't the ground but another space which was connected by an array. Swampland. Being trapped in the swampland was equivalent to being buried alive. The young man's eyes opened wide as his heart was filled with terror and unwillingness to die just like that. He speedily tried to find a way to save himself. Suddenly a silver light flashed past his eyes. The young man speedily stretched out his hand to grab that silver light, not caring about his cut hands as he speedily climbed upwards. His speed was slow and after sinking into the swamp, his naked eye couldn't see anything on his body. But he could actually feel that both his legs were wrapped up by numerous silt. He used all his might to climb upwards. His entire body's energy was gradually depleted. His forehead was filled with sweat and his body was getting heavier. Even a slight movement upwards felt like 1,000 caddies. The second room was still spitting out hot air. That gush of hot air made the young man's eyes filled with a thick layer of sweat. A sense of helplessness made the young man have the thought of giving up. He tried his best to raise his head as he looked at his brothers above him. This look met with a pair of dazzling eyes which were like the stars. That pair of eyes seemed to contain countless beliefs. She stared at him without blinking, her eyes filled with encouragement. The young man even saw her pink lips opening and closing, silently spitting out 2 words, all the best. It was Yi Qing Luo. It was their Madame Qing Luo. This iron wire was sent over by Yi Qing Luo. She held the iron wire on the eaves in one hand and the feather fan in the other. At the end of the feather fan, a piece of iron wire was pulled out. She was a lady, a delicate and petite lady. But it was a hand which supported a robust young man like him. The young man's heart was violently shaken. Yi Qing Luo obviously had the chance to directly use the iron wire to coil around his waist, pulling the young man into the iron wire. But she only gave him a chance to live, and let him work hard for his own survival. Within the youth's body, an uncontrollable profound energy suddenly surged, unceasingly battering against the profound jade heart. His eyes became extremely resolute. His breathing became smoother. His legs also became lighter. Taking advantage of this feeling, he used all 4 limbs and quickly climbed up the iron wire to the eaves. In his chest, a burning sensation kept surging. The youth's breathing was rapid and hot. Yi Qing Luo's hand was placed on the young man's shoulder. That soft little hand seemed to contain some kind of power. He forcefully suppressed the burning agitation in his chest. If I advance, my profound energy will leak out and attract the attention of the guards. Yi Qing Luo transmitted a message into the mercenary group's badge. First, store all the advancement energy into the profound jade heart. Promotion. The other youths gripped tightly onto the iron wire in disbelief. Thousands of F*CKU horses began to roar in their hearts. This could also be promoted? What the? One Nai Ruapan who ran to advance was already heaven-defying enough. Now there was another one who climbed the iron wire to advance. Chapter 510. The young man followed Yi Qing Luo's method as he guided the raging profound qi in his body to store it into his profound heart jade. 20 over youngsters hung in midair without urging him as they quietly stared at that young man storing his profound qi. The youngsters' palms were already cut by the iron wire as the air was filled with a faint stench of blood. Their hands were also feeling weak. But not a single one of them showed an impatient expression. On the contrary, a surge of lofty sentiments arose in their hearts. Indeed, Yi Qing Luo was filled with endless hope, even bringing hope to the people around her. The youngsters naturally could tell that Yi Qing Luo could obviously save their brothers directly and speedily moved to the third room to avoid the second room's heat wave. But Yi Qing Luo only gave them a chance to live. At the same time when she gave them this chance, Yi Qing Luo also passed her own life into that young man's hands. If the young man's reaction wasn't fast enough, or if he didn't have a strong and unyielding conviction, and eventually fell into the illusion array, then Yi Qing Luo who was supporting him would also fall into danger. There was a possibility that she might be implicated by him and fall down. Yi Qing Luo trusted them. Just like how they trusted Yi Qing Luo. The youngsters' gazes towards Yi Qing Luo were filled with a sense of reverence. She had always been using her own way to train them, making them become stronger. Their ears seemed to be lingering with the words that Yi Qing Luo once said. That unique cold yet elegant voice spoke in a sonorous and forceful tone, Our The World group will become the #1 mercenary group in the future. Do you have this confidence? Yes. Of course they had this confidence. With a leader like her, the #1 mercenary group was bound to become the winner. The young man had already suppressed the restlessness of his profound chi as he took the lead to climb towards the third room. His actions were nimble and all the discomfort had been thrown behind him. This was the body which had been impacted by the profound chi. The meridians in his body had all been opened and the endless profound chi in his body seemed to be inexhaustible. Looking at the young man's actions, those youngsters behind were getting more and more excited. Presumably, this trip to Death God Castle would allow them to obtain a good upgrade. Even if they were unable to upgrade their profound grade, but the upgrade of their mental state was even more valuable. More than 20 people, enduring the heat wave from the second room, shuffled to the third room. That was their destination. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she swept a glance at the surroundings, instructing the youngsters to stabilize their actions. Immediately thereafter, the feather fan flipped through the air, and another iron wire shot forth, wrapping itself around the eaves of the door to the third room. Like a nimble elf, she followed the iron wire and quickly climbed onto the eaves of the door. Her legs hooked onto the beam, and her body hung upside down in midair, falling straight down. When the youngsters saw Yiqing Luo's shocking action, they were so shocked that they almost cried out. Yiqing Luo's actions were simply too dangerous. When Yiqing Luo hung down, her face was facing the direction of the main door. Yiqing Luo swiftly took out 2 silver hairpins from the hairband fixed at the back of her head. One of the silver hairpins stabbed into the crack of the door, while the other flew out and hit the corner of the room. The youths were puzzled. They had been concentrating their attention on Yiqing Luo's movements. However, there was clearly nothing in the direction of the silver hairpin. Could it be that Yiqing Luo had missed? If this deviation triggered the mechanism. This thought had just flashed through his mind. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.